The biggest lie you've been told about the church is about to be exposed. Have you noticed that God's chosen ones are disappearing from the temples? The real reason will leave you speechless. What if I told you that everything you believed could be wrong? That there is something happening behind the spiritual scenes that few can see? If you've ever felt like you don't fit in at church, that something seems out of place, it's no coincidence. There is a powerful reason behind this, and I will reveal it to you now. Why are so many chosen ones leaving churches? The answer is not simple, and it's certainly not a lack of faith. In fact, it is precisely because your faith is deep that this restlessness arises. Have you ever felt like you don't fit in? Like something is missing, even surrounded by people who look content? You sing, pray, listen to sermons, but deep down there is still a void that nothing can fill. This feeling is not a mistake. It's a calling. Abraham also needed to leave his people to live what God had for him. God said, "Get out of your country, from your kindred, and from your father's house." Genesis 12:1. This means breaking with structures that limit divine movement. Many don't understand what you feel, but the truth is that those chosen carry a different mission. They don't settle for superficiality. They are looking for something authentic. But what if what you are looking for is not within four walls? Religion has created barriers, rules, and traditions that often imprison, but God is not limited to a physical space. The prophets were not recognized inside the temples, but in the desert, among the people, in unexpected places. Have you ever felt different since childhood? How would you see the world with different eyes? Maybe you tried to fit in, but there was always something that didn't make sense. This spiritual sensitivity is a sign. God is calling you to something greater. Jesus was rejected by the religious people of the time because he did not follow human standards. He healed on the Sabbath, spoke to sinners, walked where no one dared to tread. And what did he say about it? No one puts new wine into old wineskins. Mark 2:22. If you feel like you don't fit in, maybe it's because God is pouring something new into you. Loneliness can be painful. But what if turning away from the church is not turning away from God? What if it's a realignment to something bigger? Those chosen are called to go further, to break with structures that imprison, to live a relationship with God without barriers. The chosen ones do not always feel part of the herd. While many follow without question, they see beyond, and that makes them different. Have you ever felt like your questions were not welcome at church? That instead of answers, he received suspicious looks? Many chosen ones live this dilemma. They want to understand God in a profound way, but they encounter barriers where they should find acceptance. The truth is that most churches are not prepared to deal with standard breakers, those who ask too many questions, those who are not satisfied with superficial answers. But think about it. Didn't the great chosen ones in the Bible go through the same thing? Joseph was rejected by his own brothers before becoming governor of Egypt. David was despised even by his family before he was anointed king. What does this teach us? That those chosen are often the most rejected, and there is a price to pay for this: loneliness. Many go through periods of isolation before being prepared for something bigger. If you've ever felt this way, know that you're not alone. God may be shaping you in silence. Moses had to wander through the desert before freeing his people. Jesus spent 40 days alone before beginning his ministry. The desert is not punishment, it's preparation. But here's the question: how many can endure this phase without giving up? Many abandon their calling because they feel without direction. The problem is not loneliness itself, but what we do with it. Have you ever wondered why God allows you to feel out of place? Maybe he is taking you away from the ordinary to take you to the extraordinary. God does not call the prepared, he prepares the calls. And when the right time arrives, everything makes sense. Those who were once rejected become leaders. Those who have been humbled are exalted. God is writing your story, even when you don't understand the process. What seems like abandonment may just be the divine strategy to take you where you never imagined. Now I ask you, have you ever felt like you don't fit in, that your search for something deeper seems misunderstood? If so, write in the comments, "I am a chosen one, and I am in search of my purpose." Let's show the world that we are not alone, CTA. If you've come this far, it's because something inside you feels that there is a truth being revealed. And believe me, this knowledge is not accessible to just anyone. I want to make a very special request of you. If this message resonated with you, if at any point in this video you felt a shiver, a calling, an internal click, then you are part of this group of people who need to know this, and to ensure that this truth is not buried, that this message continues to reach more chosen ones like you, I invite you to subscribe to the channel right now, because in the next videos, I will bring even more revelations that can completely change your spiritual journey. Don't ignore this. Call. Are you really connected with God or just following a system? Many believe that being in a church automatically means being close to God. But is this the true spiritual connection? Or have we been taught to live within a cycle that keeps us busy, but far from the real divine purpose? What would you do if you discovered that your spiritual walk was shaped more by human traditions than by a genuine calling? The Bible shows that the chosen ones never fit into the religious standards of their time. Moses was not called inside a temple but in the desert. Jesus did not limit himself to the synagogues, but walked among the rejected, freeing those whom religion had forgotten. So why do we still believe that following a man-made mold is synonymous with being connected to God? Many are inside the churches, but empty inside. Physical presence does not mean spiritual connection. How many people do you know who attend services, follow rituals, but feel a deep emptiness? The truth is that God's calling is not limited to being in a building, repeating memorized words, or following a set of rules. God did not call you to be just one in the crowd. He did not create you to live a mechanical faith without life and without transformation. If you've always felt different, if you realize you don't fit in, maybe it's because your calling is greater than just filling a pew on Sundays. Your spirit feels that there is something beyond. What if everything you need to live God's plan was already within you, but the system tried to make you forget? What if your restlessness was a divine sign, a warning that you were born for something greater? The world wants you to conform. God wants you to rise up. Therefore, those who are chosen always carry a feeling of displacement. They always see what others ignore. They always feel like they have been called to something that they cannot explain, but that burns inside them. And now, what are you going to do? Are you going to continue living on automatic? Or are you going to seek the truth? Will you conform to a system, or will you open yourself to the call that God has placed within you? The answer is not in men. It's in what God has already planted in your heart. Not everyone who is within the church is within the will of God. This may be difficult to accept, but it is the truth. Raising your hands in worship does not mean knowing God. In the same way, being outside a religious institution does not mean being far from Him. God is not looking for presences at meetings, but truly surrendered hearts. And if you feel like your spiritual walk is different, that your connection with God doesn't fit with what most people practice, maybe it's because you're called to something greater, something that cannot be limited by a system created by men. The chosen ones always bothered. In the Bible, those with a special calling were the most persecuted. Hosea was betrayed, David rejected, Jeremiah ridiculed, and Jesus crucified. This teaches us a powerful truth. Whoever is chosen will never be understood by the majority, always challenges standards. It always bothers the system. Therefore, when you begin to realize that your faith does not need to be tied to empty rituals, you become a threat. People who live by appearances will try to discredit you. They will say that you are wrong. But was it God who called you to follow the crowd? Maybe now everything will make sense. How many times have you felt out of place, misunderstood, questioned about seeking a more authentic spirituality? Now the decision is before you. Will you continue to conform to what is expected of you, or will you embrace what God has really prepared? Will you stick to a system that occupies but does not transform, or will you follow the path of the chosen, those who are guided by the voice of God and not by the approval of men? I want to know what God has been saying to your heart. Write, "I am a chosen one," so that we can become stronger together on this journey. God is calling you to something greater, and this truth can no longer be ignored. Today's churches have become bureaucratic structures. Many chosen ones do not feel part of them. What should have been a place of spiritual growth became a system governed by human norms, empty traditions, and the cult of appearance. Instead of the truth, they find lifeless doctrines, shaped to please crowds. And do you know why? Because maintaining the status quo is more important than preparing the people for the spiritual battle that intensifies every day. The chosen were not called to a superficial faith. They thirst for something real, a transformative commitment. But when they enter churches looking for spiritual food, what do they find? empty rules, judgments, rituals without power. Many feel isolated, like foreigners in a place that should be their home. Because being chosen means being different. It means seeing what most don't see, feeling what most don't feel, and carrying a purpose that few understand. Churches have failed to recognize this calling. Instead of welcoming those separated by God, they impose human standards that stifle true growth. They preach material prosperity as a synonym for blessing. But they forget that the greatest chosen ones in history went through deserts, persecutions, and relentless trials. Now think, how many times have you asked yourself why you face so many battles? How many times have you felt alone, even surrounded by people inside the church? This is no coincidence, it's part of the process. God polishes the chosen ones in the fire, but few want to talk about it, because the truth scares. It doesn't fill temples, doesn't make crowds feel comfortable, but it frees. Why are modern churches not prepared for the chosen ones? Because those chosen challenge the system. They are not satisfied with superficial explanations. They question, they seek, they want more. While many just follow rules, the chosen ones want to know the heart of God. They do not accept empty doctrines. They are not fooled by leaders who preach, but do not live what they say. And that bothers you. This shakes structures. This exposes the religiosity that keeps multitudes trapped in a cycle of spiritual stagnation. When a chosen one awakens, he realizes the true battle. He sees that he does not fight against flesh and blood, but against spiritual forces that operate in the shadows. He understands that many leaders do not want strong, prepared disciples, but passive followers who never question. And that's where the rejection begins. The chosen one becomes a threat. Your presence is uncomfortable. His search for truth challenges a system that benefits from spiritual ignorance. The chosen ones always pass through the desert before being elevated. Moses, before freeing the people, spent 40 years in the desert. David, before reigning, was persecuted. Joseph, before the palace, was betrayed and sold into slavery. And today, the chosen ones continue to go through trials. But instead of being prepared for it, they are discouraged. They are led to believe that their suffering is a consequence of error, when in fact it is a sign of God's calling. Churches avoid talking about it because this truth doesn't sell. Don't crowd temples. It doesn't generate applause. But the truth does not bend to what is convenient, and the chosen ones know this. If your spiritual journey has been lonely, maybe it's because God is separating you. Maybe He is calling you to something greater, something that goes beyond what most can understand. The chosen ones were not made to fit in. They were made to transform. And this transformation begins when you understand that your faith is not tied to a system, but to a real and deep connection with God. Comment below if you have ever felt this rejection within the church. Have you ever wondered why your walk looks so different from others? Share your experience in the comments. Let's discover together this special call that God has for the chosen ones. The chosen ones have always felt that there is something different about them, a restlessness, a feeling that this world is not your true home. This is no coincidence. There is a calling on your life, a purpose that often seems like a burden, but is actually a divine mission. Have you ever noticed how certain doors close for you while others open in an inexplicable way? This happens because your walk does not follow common patterns. God has a plan drawn up for you, and often He needs to shape you in ways that the world doesn't understand. Those chosen face persecution, not only from declared enemies, but often within the church itself, within their own home. This is because light bothers darkness, and those who do not understand its essence feel the need to discredit you. But pay attention, this rejection doesn't mean you're wrong. On the contrary, it is a sign that you are on the right path. Your faith is disturbing. Your presence is a warning to those who still live in darkness. How many times have you questioned your own journey? How many nights have you spent in silence, trying to understand why certain things only happen to you? The world tries to offer you superficial answers, but none of them satisfy your soul. This happens because you were not called to the ordinary, but to the extraordinary. While many are satisfied with shallow explanations, you are looking for something bigger, something that really makes sense. And this thirst for spiritual knowledge is another strong sign of your calling. There are times when God allows isolation. You feel like no one around you understands you, that conversations seem empty, that relationships become superficial. But do you know why? Because He is separating you. Chosen cannot mix with anyone, cannot accommodate themselves in any environment. You need to be polished, prepared for something great. This may feel lonely, but it is actually a gift. God takes you out of environments that don't serve you and puts you in the right place at the right time. The challenges you face are not punishments, they are training. God does not choose the capable, He empowers the chosen. Every tear you shed, every injustice you suffered, every battle you fought, it all has a purpose. You are being shaped into something greater, something your mind cannot yet fully comprehend. But at the right time, everything will be revealed, and most impressive, you feel it. Something inside you knows there is a calling, even when everything seems uncertain. Even when you think about giving up, there is an inner voice that pushes you to continue. This voice does not come from you, it comes from God. He is guiding you, showing you the signs, preparing you for the mission. And now I want to hear from you. Have you ever felt this restlessness? Have you ever had moments when you realized that you don't fit into the mold of this world? Comment below because I want to hear your story. Since the beginning of time, God has separated people for missions that go beyond human understanding. If you are here, watching this video, perhaps it is because you feel a different calling within you. Something that doesn't fit into traditional molds, something that worries you, that drives you to seek answers to questions that most people don't even dare to ask. Have you ever felt like your life was never like anyone else's? That since you were a child you have experienced battles, rejections and challenges that seemed unfair? Well, no, none of this was by chance. God's chosen ones often do not find space within traditional paths. They feel like there is something bigger calling them, a mission that separates them from the ordinary. But this separation is not punishment. It is preparation. And perhaps this journey will take you to places you never imagined. Have you ever stopped to think that if everything was working out, according to the pattern you were taught, you would never seek this revelation? Discomfort is a warning. Isolation is training. God is allowing this departure from the conventional path because He wants to take you to a higher level. Many ask, if God chose me, why do I suffer so much? Why do I face so much resistance? The answer is simple but profound. All you went through was training. The people who rejected you, the doors that closed, the moments when you felt alone, it was all part of the plan. You weren't meant to fit in because God never wanted you to be just another one. There is something inside you that bothers the world around you, and this restlessness is not a mistake, it is a mark. The chosen ones are prepared differently. They cannot follow normal standards because their mission is not normal. Maybe you're asking yourself, so what should I do? The first step is to accepting that your life will never be like others, and that's not a bad thing. It's a privilege, but it is a privilege that comes with responsibilities. You need to strengthen your faith, seek answers beyond what is visible, and above all, remain firm even when the world tries to convince you that you are wrong. God always speaks to the chosen ones, but not always in the way we expect. He can speak through dreams, signs, internal concerns, and even closing paths that seemed promising. If you feel like something inside you is pushing you towards a new path, don't ignore it. Don't fight it. Often the difficulties we face are just God redirecting us to our true purpose. What if I told you that everything you've been through to date was just a stepping stone to something much bigger? Would you believe it? Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever felt this calling? Have you noticed signs that your life is being guided towards something greater? Comment below and share your experience. Your testimony could be the answer someone else needs to hear. Many who left the traditional church discovered something profound. Their connection to God was not dependent on a building, predefined rituals, or a religious leader. On the contrary, as they moved away from the institutional structure, they felt that their faith was refined, like gold in the fire. This spiritual movement, which many do not understand, reveals a powerful principle. God is not trapped behind four walls. Let's think about Marcos, for example. He spent 20 years attending a traditional church, involved in ministries, leadership, and all the activities expected of a faithful member. But something inside him felt out of place. He felt there was something more, something that went beyond Sunday meetings and repetitive preaching. That was when he decided to seek God on his own, without intermediaries, without formalities. And then something extraordinary happened. Mark began to experience an intimacy with God that he had never felt before. He realized that his spirituality did not depend on physically being in a temple, but rather on his willingness to hear God's voice anywhere. This does not mean that all churches are bad or that no one should attend them, but rather that the walk with God is much broader than any institution can offer. There are many people who encounter God more genuinely when they are alone, on a spiritual retreat, in a moment of prayer in their room, or even contemplating nature. The Bible is full of examples of people who found God far from temples and crowds. Moses encountered God in the wilderness, Elijah heard his voice in the silence of the cave, and even Jesus often retreated to lonely places to pray. And this resonates strongly with those who feel they don't fit into a traditional religious environment. Many are called to a purpose outside conventional structures and discover that their mission is in the world, where they can bring light to those who need it most. How many people have shared testimonies that, after leaving the church, they began to help those in need, to care for the sick, to emotionally support those who were lost? The true gospel is not limited to a Sunday service, but to living God's love daily, in actions and in truth. Those who feel misunderstood for not following the traditional path of faith often face judgment. They are seen as deviants, rebels, or people without spiritual commitment. But the truth is that many of them experience God much more deeply than they ever imagined. They develop an unshakable faith because they are no longer supported by an institution, but rather by a personal and authentic experience with the Creator. And this faith is resistant to crises, human failures, and disappointments with religious leaders. If you've experienced this, if you've felt that your connection with God grew precisely when you moved away from a religious system, share your experience in the comments. Many people feel alone on this journey and can be strengthened by knowing that they are not wrong in seeking a deeper relationship with God outside of what has been imposed on them. Comment, "My faith grew outside of church," or "I really found God when I left the religious system," and we will share inspiring testimonies. Remember, God does not dwell in temples made by human hands, but in hearts willing to seek Him in spirit and in truth. Don't be afraid to follow the path He is showing you, even if it is different from what others expect of you. Your spiritual journey is unique, and God wants to reveal Himself to you in powerful ways wherever you are. Have you ever felt this stronger connection with God outside of church? Let's talk about it in the comments. From the moment you began to realize that your life was different, something inside you whispered that there was a greater purpose. Maybe you faced inexplicable rejections, seemingly unreasonable difficulties, or a constant feeling of being out of place in the world around you. This is no coincidence. Those chosen always follow paths marked by challenges because they are shaped for something great. What if I told you that every tear, every battle, and every moment of loneliness were actually clear signs that God has something special in store for you? Maybe you're asking yourself, but why me? Why does my life seem so much harder than everyone else's? The answer lies in preparation. God never gives great missions to those who have not been tested. And you, since childhood, have been prepared, honed, strengthened for a calling that many could not bear to carry. The attacks, the chases, the moments when everything seemed to fall apart, everything was part of this bigger plan. Think about how many times you felt alone, with no one to understand what was going on inside your heart. This is because the chosen ones often need to be separated, away from influences that could divert them from the path traced by God. You may have noticed that certain friendships simply dissolve, certain environments become unbearable, and some opportunities that seemed promising never materialize. But all of this is divine protection. You were called to something unique, and that requires special preparation. And here is the great truth. The chosen are never easily understood. If you feel that the people around you cannot understand your way of thinking, your emotional intensity, your spiritual sensitivity, know that this is a sign. You see the world differently because you were destined to walk a road that few will have the courage to follow. Your spirit feels things that others ignore. Your intuition alerts you to situations that no one notices, and your connection with the divine is deep, even in moments when you feel that God is silent. But I want you to understand something important. God's silence never means abandonment. Many times He is watching you in the midst of trials to see if you remain firm, if you continue to believe, even without immediate answers. And those who resist, who persevere, are the ones who receive the greatest rewards. So if you feel like you are in a desert moment, where nothing seems to make sense, where prayers seem unanswered, remember, the greatest warriors go through the most difficult training. Now stop for a moment and reflect. How many times have you felt that something inside you was screaming that you were born for more, that you have a purpose, even if you don't know exactly what it is yet? This is not an illusion. It is not a coincidence. This calling you feel deep in your soul is real, and the more you try to ignore it, the more life pushes you back to that truth. And this is exactly what separates the chosen ones from the rest of the world, the ability to recognize the signs and accept the purpose. Not everyone is ready for this. Many flee, resist, try to fit into a system that was never made for them. But those who accept, those who embrace the journey, these are the ones who transform the world. Now I ask you, have you ever been through something like this? Do you feel like your life has always had an invisible direction, guided by something greater? If so, write in the comments, "I am a chosen one, and I accept my purpose." Let's strengthen this community and share our experiences. And if this message resonated with you, keep following, because there is still a lot to reveal about the path of the chosen ones. God is guiding you, and this is just the beginning. Attention, chosen one. You can't miss the next one. There is a hidden truth that few realize, but it is about to be revealed to you. What no one told you about the chosen ones, why they are being persecuted and running away from churches, the answer will shock you and change your view on everything. Click now before it's too late. Your awakening is just a click away.